Let's look at our scripture today. Today we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 12 through 17. And I titled this sermon, Loyalty to Covenant Identity. Covenant identity, I think, is probably an unusual term for us. What exactly does that mean? Do you know exactly what that would mean for you? Your covenant identity. That's pretty unique language. So I hope by the end of the sermon you can identify with that and recognize exactly what it is, because that's what our text talks about today. As we pull into verses 12 through 17, we've already done two pericopes that are also a part of this. And one thing that we've been learning in our Wednesday night class is the uniqueness of an Oriental book. It's valuable for us to remember that the Bible is not an American document. That might be a shock to some people. The Bible has been translated into English so Americans can read it, but this is not our type of writing. This is what we call Oriental writing, and this came to us from the Orient. And if that sounds weird, the Orient is the East. The Occident is the West. And if you're not familiar with that, Turkey or Asia Minor, just to the right of Greece, Turkey or Asia Minor is the dividing point. Everything to the east of Turkey and Asia Minor, Syria, Israel, Palestine, everything to the east is called the Orient. Very unique. The Bible lands that we're familiar with are called the Middle East, right? The Middle East. And then everything to the west of Turkey, Greece, Spain, Rome, that's all considered the West. So this document is Eastern, everything everywhere from Iraq in Mesopotamia all the way over to Jerusalem in Israel. This book spans that area over there. One of the things that they do in that Oriental writing is they write in layers, and that is useful for people who want to remember what they're hearing and implement it in their life. We're not like that. I guess I would call us scientific or technical writers. We write one thing and then we leave it and we go to the next thing and we leave it, we go to the next thing. So in our text today, we see an example of that. We've got 3 layers so far where he said the same thing, but each time he's tried to say it in a way that gives us a greater understanding. Let me tell you what the 3 are, because we're doing the third one today. All the 3 of these are still talking about one particular thing, but by layering, it builds new insight into an idea. It's almost like finding synonyms. So instead of saying the same thing the same way 3 times, they find new words to say the same thing. So the first part of what we're looking at, the historical context is the church that he's writing to in Hebrews is suffering persecution. A lot of them are getting weak. A lot of them are ready to bail on church, bail on the community, and just forget this whole Jesus thing because it's costing me too much. They're thinking about bailing. That's the context. So the first thing he says in verses 1 through 4, he uses an athletic training metaphor to get them to reframe the struggle that they're going through. The athletic metaphor is, hey, when you're lifting weights, don't you lift until it hurts. Lift until it hurts. And that's what he says. Reframe your Christian persecution as though you were training till it hurts. Then he goes on and he layers on top of that. He doesn't leave it behind. He layers it. He gives it even a bigger context. That was last week, verses 5 through 11. That was the parental pedagogy. The way parents teach their children, the way a father teaches his son. And he said, when your father was working with you, sometimes it was painful. When he was training you, when he was teaching you, when he was working with you. I have my own personal example of that. I used to go welding with my dad in the summers. He would rebuild rock crushers, and it was my job to hold up the motor that he had to tack onto this machinery in order to turn the rock crusher. So I held the motor up there and he got up on top and he tacked it. Well, if you've ever seen welding, what happens when a guy is welding? This molten red hot lava, melted metal starts falling down and sparks are all over the place and I'm underneath, which meant sparks were landing on me, they're landing in my hair, they're landing in my shoes, and I feel like this is terrible and horrible. Not to mention we worked straight through the weekend nonstop because we had to be done by Monday. So if it was snowing, if it was raining, if it was cold, if it was wonderful suntan weather, or if it was horrible frostbite weather, we still worked. And I cried through a lot of that. It was painful and difficult and hard and didn't feel fair at my age. But my dad was training me to be a man. A man does what needs to get done, no matter how cold it is or how wet it is or how long it takes or how uncomfortable it is. Being a man means doing what needs to get done. So he was training me and it was painful. And that's what he was talking about. That was another way to view when you go through difficulties as a church and persecution. Think of it like that. It's difficult and painful, but you're going to make a better person after that. Today we come to the third thing, and I'm calling it a renewed resolve. You've been through some tough stuff. You feel pretty beat up. It's time to get yourself together and renew your resolve to your covenant identity. And I think that's what's going to make the difference today. If you can walk away understanding covenant identity, what am I supposed to be renewing myself towards? And that's what we look at today. In our text, I want to start at the end of our text first, because it makes it obvious that he's layered this and tried to exhort them, but now he's threatening. We're going to read what's called an ultimatum. Either you do this right and stay under God's good grace, or you continue on the road that you're on, and you're going to fall out from under God's salvation altogether. It is an ultimatum. We don't like those nowadays. When I was in management, they trained us, don't ever give your men ultimatums. Try to help them see why the value of doing what you want, but don't give them ultimatums. That was foreign to me because I thought an ultimatum was the right way to manage people. Do it right or you get fired. That's the easy way to do it. But anyway, that's what we see in our text. So let's look at it, verse 16, and that puts us in the right frame to recognize the purpose of this pericope. Verse 16, see that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. You know that afterwards, when he desired to inherit the blessings, he was rejected because he found no chance to repent, even though he sought it with tears. That's what's setting the tone for our pericope. Don't be foolish and don't be a mistake. Don't overlook the value of something for a short-term fix. That's what he's trying to tell them. So let's look at Esau and that story and what it was that Esau did. When the text here today says, don't be sexually immoral or unholy, you need to understand sexual immorality in the Bible normally is a metaphor. We don't have anything in the Bible that tells us Esau was sexually immoral. So he's using this as a metaphor. Throughout the Bible, God says, when you break covenant obedience with me, I'm going to compare that to a woman that commits adultery on her husband. I'm going to compare that. That's like going out and sleeping with someone you're not married to. That's the kind of relationship we have with each other, God is saying. We have this covenant bond between us. And when you step out from under this covenant bond and rebel towards me, that's like committing adultery. That's like being sexually immoral. And that's the metaphor here. a metaphor for breaking your covenant allegiance to God. And he's saying, don't do what Esau did. Don't break your allegiance to something important and grand because you're going through a momentary struggle. In this case, in the context of these churches that he's writing to, he's talking about people that are considering departing from the body. And that's going to be an important concept for us to grasp. This body, this allegiance to a group, your allegiance to your little community. And when he says community, he means the church, the called out ecclesia of God. Those people are your community. And this was a let me stop and say something that I think part of what makes this understanding this text. He's warning the church, make sure you don't leave the community, which has a much greater significance. Ultimately, it's salvation. You stay in this community who is dedicated to God, and it's not that you're getting saved or going to heaven alone. In that first century Greco-Roman culture, societies were very communal. And I've had a very difficult time trying to explain how impactful that was, because in America, for the most part, we don't really understand community. What my great-grandpa did, I don't even know his name. And in those cultures, your father, your grandpa, your great-grandpa, all of that was, you were a part of that lineage. You were a part of that group, and they had an intense sense of commitment to a group. And in America, most people are what we call individualistic. Even when it comes to church, people are independent. Most people can leave church and go home and get along just fine without anybody else. Maybe it's our economy, maybe it's the culture. But even friends that I have grown up with in the church that just got restless and just said, I don't like it here anymore. And they left and start their own church. You recognize how easy that is? That for some reason, that's permitted in our culture. Hang out with this group for a little while. If I don't like this group, I'll go down and I'll try a different group. But there's not really that sense of, I've got to stay with this group and salvation depends on it. It's not really like that for us. It was for them, though. Let me try to give you an example, guys, because it's so hard to say what is expected of them when in our culture we can't really relate to that expectation. So let me try something. Let's use the example of maybe like a volunteer fire department. And you're in a community where there's no, city-sponsored thing, so you create a volunteer fire department. Several people go and they show up at the building and they're volunteering and they have a purpose. They have something specific set in mind that they as a group are dedicated to, keeping people safe and stopping fires, stopping people from losing their life's work. And we're all going to get together in this little community, this little group. We're going to have rules, we're going to have expectations, and we're all committed to this because it takes all of us to be able to go put out these fires. Can you see that? That would be a communal community. And if 3 or 4 of the guys all of a sudden start saying, man, carrying hoses up 10 flights of stairs, it's getting old. Getting on these red trucks and driving down the road is getting boring. The equipment is heavy, and I just don't feel like putting on the stuff anymore. I don't know, guys. I think I'm going to bail. Can you imagine how the rest of the community, the other guys would feel? We need you. Putting out these fires is not something one guy can do all by himself. We need to stay together as a group. You wouldn't want to lose those guys. Maybe that's the best idea of being forced to exist in a community. I think the Bible tells us we should be that way. It's not the American way, but it should be that way in the church. We should feel that way about each other. Okay, so what the church is dealing with is this communal, collective group that has been called out. And to make it even a little bit, oh boy, let me see where I gave this to you guys. Yes, okay, it's coming. Okay, so that was it. And he uses Esau as an idea of, here is a guy that is part of a communal group. Esau, a descendant of Abraham. If anybody should have been proud of their family, their heritage, firstborn, his role in his little family community, Esau receiving the family inheritance meant he was the next leader for his family, his group. His would be the next name on the docket. Esau had a huge privilege, a very lavish, exalted privilege that was his. And the Bible says, but he didn't respect it at all. He was hungry. And he could care less that he was a part of Abraham's lineage. He just wanted something to eat. Can you realize how dumb that must have seemed? Esau was hungry, and his brother Jacob happened to be cooking. And Esau said, give me some of that, I'm starving. And Jacob, being pretty underhanded, said, well, give me the family inheritance. Whatever gets left to you in the family will. Whatever estate, whatever property, whatever role in the family business, whatever gets left to you in that family will, give that to me and I'll give you a bowl of lentils. Do you see how that's a ridiculous offer? Who would do that? Esau did exactly that. I could care less about the family business. I could care less about the family name. I'm hungry. Give me the stew. You can have all of that. And then you can bet years later, when the will is being read, and all the stuff that Esau should have been privileged to, he realized, I ruined it. I gave all of that away because 10 years ago I wanted a bowl of lentils. Now Jacob, and the Bible is saying to the Christians in that first century group, realize how important the group that you're a part of is. You're a part of a group that is called a body in the New Testament, and the body has a head and hands and arms and eyes and ears, and you can't just chop off an ear without it affecting the body. You're a part of a group that is countercultural, and it's so important for the group to stay together to survive. And so he's rebuking people that are thinking about leaving the group because it's starting to get too hard. Like some of those volunteer firemen that are starting to leave the firehouse because the equipment's too heavy. And he's rebuking them, saying, don't do that. Esau wanted the privileges of salvation without having to have any kind of inner allegiance to the group of people that is being saved. Esau traded something that was permanent, his inheritance, and in our metaphor, that is salvation. He traded something permanent and everlasting for something that was only momentary. He gave up this covenant collective with his inheritance for a moment of immediate gratification. And he says, don't be short-sighted like Esau was. And then he goes on to say about Esau, if you do that, you're not going to just be walking out on your community. You're also going to be walking out of salvation. You're going to be moving yourself from a state of inheritance and salvation, and you're going to be stepping out from under salvation if you leave this group. That theme of losing salvation, guys, has been one of the core theological points in the book of Hebrews. I want to give you, there's been 6 of them so far. I don't know if you've kept track. Be careful or you'll lose your salvation is what he's telling this first century group. There were 6 of them. Let me give you all of them. One of them was just now. Don't be like Esau. Lost his inheritance because of a moment of stupidity. Let me take you back through all of them here real quick. Hebrews chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. We must pay closer attention lest we drift away. And how will we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? If we have it, but we neglect it, how are we ever going to escape the punishment that comes? Chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. We have become partakers if we hold fast to the beginning of our confidence and stay firm all the way to the end. If you can't endure all the way to the end, you can lose what was already in your grasp. Chapter 4, this is the third one. Chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, while the promise of entering His rest still stands, let us fear, lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. Similar to another text, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, because you may just fail to reach your salvation. Number 4, Hebrews chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. It is impossible, if they fall away, to restore them again to repentance. Number 5, this is in chapter 10, Hebrews 10, 26 through 31. If we deliberately go on sinning after receiving a knowledge of the truth, then there is no more sacrifice for sin. And we did a big study on what that meant. Deliberately is an Old Testament term, not what we think of as I'm deliberately sinning. It's an Old Testament term. There was a difference between deliberate sins and unintentional sins. We did a big study on that. But there are 6 times in the book of Hebrews. Repetition is important. If it gets said once, it's gospel. If it gets said 6 times, better pay attention. Be careful lest you walk away from your salvation. And that's what he's telling the members here who are thinking about walking out on Jesus. He says, remember, we're called out, ecclesia, called out to be separate. The word holy means be separate. And in that culture, guys, again, let me remind you how this message was more vital, because they couldn't walk away from their group. Let me give you an idea of what Christianity looked like in Greco-Roman culture, why they couldn't walk away. In Greco-Roman culture, first century, the etymology of the day, the way people discovered truth, was through the gods. It's hard to imagine that, but first century Greco-Roman culture, everybody believed in gods. Not just one God, though. Any and every God. Your God, her God, their God. We love them all. Worshipping the gods is the right place to be. We call it mythology. But that's what was happening in first century Greco-Roman culture. When Christianity came along, that was the mindset of the people. We love the gods. If you remember, Paul went to Athens. Paul says, oh, I can see that you worship a lot of gods. And what did Paul say? Let me present to you the one and only true God. That was what Christianity was like in first century Greco-Roman culture. You're living in a group of people that says, all the gods are wonderful, the more gods the better. Tell me about your gods, I'll tell you about my gods. Let's all just live together and not be critical and judgmental. We love all these things, whether you have a metal god or a wood god or a god that's shaped like a human or a god that's shaped like a bird. We love them all. And then Christianity comes along and says, gods made out of metal are not real gods. Gods made out of wood are not real gods. All the gods that you guys worship are not real gods. There's only one real God in the world, and that's my God. Oprah would get mad at you for that, wouldn't she? Everybody's got their own way to do. No, that's not Christianity. In the first century culture, the Christian was going against the grain. He was saying, no, 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 those are not gods. We're not going to go to that party. We're not going to eat that meat. We're not going to go to that celebration. We're not going to go to that festival because those are not real gods. Only Jesus, the Son of God, is our true God. There's only one. All of yours are false. And if you remember, people got angry about that. What does it look like today for us? Today for us, it's quite different because in our culture, the world does not believe in all the gods like they used to. In fact, most of the world doesn't believe in any God. So the culture that we're in, and how does Christianity go against the grain in our culture? The culture that we're in is called postmodernism. If you ever wanted to go down a rabbit hole, look up on YouTube, postmodernism. What is it? It's a fascinating insight into people's logic nowadays. And if you do your research, you'll understand why politicians just seem ridiculous. You'll understand why people think it's okay in Portland to just stand in front of police cars and ICE cars and throw water bottles. You'll understand that if you understand postmodernism. Postmodernism basically says there's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as objective, concrete truth. There is only your truth. So if you want to be a boy, you can be a boy. Right? That's what we've been hearing today. If you want to be a girl, you can be a girl. Because there's no such thing as truth. Can you imagine? That's our culture. That's our reality. People are convinced of that. No such thing as truth. Whatever you want to be true is what's true. That's the world we live in, guys. Well, how is Christianity countercultural to that? What kind of stance do we take on that? Let's let Jesus define it and see if this would rub people wrong today. John chapter 18 and verse 37. Then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered, "Well, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." We are unified. We are brought together because we are collectively saying something that the rest of our community rejects and will get angry about. When the community says, "I think this is what's true," our countercultural response is, no, Jesus' whole purpose for coming here was to reveal the truth to us. And everybody who actually loves truth is going to love hearing what Jesus has to say. So if you think what you believe is true and you hate what Jesus has to say about it, you're not in the truth. You have nothing to do with the truth. You're outside of the truth. We are the ones that bear the truth because Jesus is the one that tells us what's true and what's not. That's how we are countercultural. That's our mission statement, and that is why there is a unity, a community about us. Is because if you talk about your faith outside of the church building, you'll realize you're out there all alone. And you're going to want to come back to church, and you're going to want to come back and have fellowship with your family here, because here we're all doing the same thing. We're all embracing the same idea. And so this is where we want to be. And just like the firefighters, it should break our hearts when we see someone losing out on our mission statement. Someone that's kind of losing faith about it and wandering away. It would break our hearts. We want them back. And we don't want them out there, because if they're out there all by themselves, the only way to survive out there by yourself is to reject Jesus. Because the community out here is not going to let Jesus tell them what's right and wrong. You're going to have to become like them. Shouldn't want to do that. That's how a person loses their salvation. This is where we get our identity as a body of believers, as a group, because we believe the same thing that Jesus said. Because anyone who is of the truth listens to Jesus' voice, and that's us. We're the ones that listen to Jesus' voice, despite what the magazines and the news and the educational system, despite what it says, despite all of that, despite what the psychologists say, we believe what Jesus says. Everyone else is wrong. So that's the idea, this community. Let's go back to the beginning of our text. The beginning of the text talks about it's going to be important then that these people that have gotten weak, these people that have gotten feeble, he's telling them, you're going to need to renew your resolve to your church community. Let's look at that, verse 12. Therefore, lift your drooping hands. Strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. He's saying you've been worn down, you've felt silenced, and you're starting to stray, you're starting to drift off course, and you're in danger of forgetting about the importance of your church family. You're in danger of losing sight that you are just a tiny part of a bigger group. You're in danger of not cherishing this allegiance to Jesus and your allegiance to the truth, the only source of truth. And you're in danger of walking away from that. Dig deep and renew your dedication to your church family. Renew the fact that you have your identity within this church family. Renew the solidarity to other people that just like you have pledged their allegiance to Jesus, because you're not going to be able to survive if you're out there by yourself. Let me put a pin in the sermon right here. I want to stop for just a minute and remind us about this group mentality, why this would have made sense. And what I'm concerned, the message I don't want to give, this sounds almost like, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, tough it out, and try harder. And I need to say, I hope that's not the way it sounds. Because here's the difference. If you're out there all alone, and you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, and then a preacher comes along and basically kicks you and say, hey, get up, try harder, be stronger, don't let it get you down. That sounds very tone deaf, doesn't it? It would be a horrible thing. The Bible says that, was it Jesus or John the Baptist? He's not going to break a bruised reed. If you come to Jesus and you're already broken, He's not going to make things worse for you. He says, come to me because, I forgot it, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. So He's not trying to pile more on somebody that feels like, come on, the weight of the world is already on my shoulders. I don't need you. No, He's trying to redirect people that are in danger of getting outside of the group. And letting yourself fall outside of the group is where the danger is, because in the group is where you have strength and solidarity and help and companionship. The Bible says, bear one another's burdens, right? In the body is where you're safest, because we're supposed to be a community that is helpful, and this is the right place to be. So He's telling them to be diligent about their commitment to the body. He's not trying to be hard on somebody that's already got things tough. I hope I'm making that distinction. That's the difference between the group mentality and the individualistic, isolated mentality. If you're out there all alone and isolated and somebody says, pull yourself up and try harder, that's overwhelming, that's too much. The message of the gospel is come in and find rest for your weary soul. So I don't want to interpret this incorrectly, guys. The resolve that He's telling the people to have is stay in the group, stay connected with your lifeline. Avoid doing what Esau did and overlooking the biggest blessing that is in your life, your relationship with the body, the church. The body here, he's basically saying, do you know what an outpost is? An outpost is a group here that is representative of a group somewhere else. Lately, I've been reading a lot about India and Britain. Britain had outposts in India. This group of people represented another group of people far away. Do you know that you, church, are the outpost of heaven? We're the small group here in this community that represents the larger group up there. Saints that have gone on before us, angels that worship God. We're the outpost. We're the visual marker in this community of what that community looks like. And to God, that's very important. We can't underestimate how important our representation is. We're the outpost, and that's what He's getting on them about. Something else about the text we see. Let's go on to verse 14. Verse 14, strive for peace with everyone, and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Peace with everyone here means the church. It's not the world. He's talking about within your community, the church, strive to live at peace with each other, because there's factions that are starting to happen. I want to look at that a little bit closer. Notice two words. I would put a square around these two words in verse 14. Put a square around peace and put a square around holiness, because He's already told them something about peace and holiness in the previous sermons that I've given you, and we've already forgotten about it. So He's asking them to put into practice here something that He already told them they should be training for back there, earlier in verse 12. Let me show you what that text. So here He's saying, strive. Strive is an important word also. Normally the Bible says seek. Seek this out. Try to do this. Here it's pursue it. Work really hard at this. What are the two things you're going to work hard at? Peace and holiness. But those are hinged to something He already said. Let me take you back. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 10. Back in the fatherly pedagogy, when your father is training you and it hurts, he's doing it for your own good. And he said, you're supposed to learn something as a result of that painful training. What is it? Verse 10. They disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but God disciplines us for our good so that we may share in His holiness. Put a square around that. This is where we're getting our holiness from. Verse 11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful. There's your word, peace. It reveals the peaceful fruit of righteousness for those that have been trained by it. And what he has just told the congregation in verse 14, pursue, practice, make every diligent effort to maintain peace and holiness right now with your congregation, with your group, because that's the purpose of this stressful struggle that you're going through, is to develop peace and holiness in your life. So because this difficult moment in time is meant to develop peace and holiness. Holiness means set apart. You're unique. You're countercultural. Your views go against the grain. That's holiness. He says, grow that holiness, because that's the purpose of this struggle that you're going through. So while you're going through the struggle, pursue and practice and work on being peaceful, maintaining peace, and being holy. Because that's what this is supposed to be producing in your life. That's what this difficulty is all about. It's training you. This is your opportunity to practice something that's very, very hard, which is going to make you better at it. And the ultimatum is, if you don't use this training period to learn to be at peace with people and to learn to be holy, unique, set apart, different, if you don't let yourself get trained by this moment and you walk away from the group, you're walking away from your salvation. Watch out for your own stubbornness. Verse 15. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble. And many people can become defiled. There is a danger if one of the members begins to waver in their commitment to Jesus. You're going to want to put a square around root of bitterness and cross-reference yourself to Deuteronomy 29, 18 through 20. Deuteronomy 29, 18 through 20, that's what he's drawing from. So let's find out, what does this look like? What is he warning them not to do? Verse 18, beware, lest there be among you a root bearing poisonous and bitter fruit, one who, when he hears the words of the sworn covenant, blesses himself in his heart, saying, I'll be safe, even though I walk in the stubbornness of my own heart. This is a person that decides to consciously break the covenant, walk away from the covenant. Somebody that begins to think, it doesn't matter if I'm a part of this group or a part of some other group, it doesn't matter. That's what this person is thinking. Verse 20. The Lord will not be willing to forgive him, but rather the anger of the Lord and His jealousy will smoke against that man. And the curses written in this book will set upon him, and the Lord will blot out his name from under heaven. That's the text that he quotes to these church members that are thinking about just calling it quits because it's getting hard. Not only does he say, remember what happened to Esau. Esau did what you're thinking about doing, and he regretted it. Because later on, when it came time to inherit everything, he was kicked out. even though he cried to get back in. That reminds us of the flood story too, doesn't it? God called to him, called to him, called to him. Once the doors shut and the rains came, now everybody wants in. And he said, too late. Don't do that. And here he quotes, takes them back to the Old Testament, and he says, remember what God told Israel. Do not think for a moment that you can walk away from God and be safe. Don't let yourself be convinced that you don't need this. Protect yourself from that. I remember quickly, I've drawn this for you guys before, Korah's rebellion. I wish I would have given this to you. I'm just now thinking about it. But Korah's rebellion, try to find that in the Old Testament. Korah's rebellion was Moses had exercised discipline on an Israelite for breaking the Sabbath. They knew what God had said about the Sabbath. He broke the Sabbath, and Moses executed discipline on that man for doing what God said don't do. And this group called the family of Korah didn't like that. They didn't like that somebody was being disciplined for breaking the rules. You know what it means when somebody doesn't mind not getting disciplined for breaking the rules? It means that person is probably breaking the rules themselves. But the child that obeys the rules, the child that is righteous and blameless, the child that exalts and values the rules, when he sees somebody breaking the rules, he thinks they need to be punished. Because I value and respect this. When someone doesn't, something bad needs to happen. Otherwise, these rules are not really worthy of respect, are they? So Korah said, Moses, who do you think you are? Executing discipline on us like you're the boss of us. Who made you the boss of us, Moses? We don't like this. And as a matter of fact, Moses, and here's my favorite part of the story, Korah's family says, God thinks we're all holy. And He likes us just the way we are. I'm serious. That's exactly what the text says. Go back and find it, guys. That's the clinch pin. God thinks we're holy and God thinks we're fine just the way we are, Moses, so we don't want you telling us what to do. And Moses said, oh, really? I'll tell you, let's do a little experiment. Everybody that's close to Korah's house, you might want to move away from Korah's house. Okay, Korah, let's see if God is fine with you just the way you are. And if you remember the story, the earth opens up and swallows his whole family. After that, the 250 men that thought about joining Korah in the rebellion, fire came down out of heaven and struck them all dead. You got to find the story. And isn't it amazing that that happened to somebody who thought, oh, God likes me just the way I am. I don't need church. I don't need rules. I don't need commandments. I don't need to conform. I don't need to be a part of something. I'm fine just the way I am. That's a scary position to hold. Don't sacrifice your family identity is what he's telling these people. Do you remember he said, we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. You are surrounded by all the wonderful, beautiful saints that came before you. Abraham, David, Joshua, Moses, all of these wonderful saints that came before you. And for us, Paul, Peter, Andrew, all of those guys, you belong to the same group as them, and we're all getting to heaven together. And he says, don't think about giving that up because of the stubbornness of your heart. You're all part of this body. Last verse, 1 Corinthians 12, 20 through 21. As it is, there are many parts, but there's only one body. The eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. Nor can the head say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are the more indispensable parts of the body. Cherish it. Don't walk away from it. You don't achieve salvation alone. We achieve salvation together. We all travel there together. We're all the outpost of heaven as a collective. We are all people that are going against the current, against the grain. That's all of us together as a group. And all of us are headed towards a permanent heavenly inheritance. And he says, don't trade that for a moment of relief. Don't be like Esau. God bless you guys.